If you've been around me any length of time, or you've taken in any of our episodes of NP2Cast, you know you've heard words like this: fresh expressions of church, blended ecology, mixed ecology, FX. Well, what does that mean exactly? And maybe more importantly, what does it look like? What does a fresh expression of church look like? What does an FX look like? What does a blended ecology of church look like? I'm glad you asked. That's why we're bringing in Reverend Matt Lake with Williamsport United Methodist Church in Williamsport, Virginia, to share what his fresh expressions of church look like in his blended ecology. In part one of our episode, we're going to get to know a little bit about Matt, and we're going to get to know a little bit about Williamsport UMC and his network of fresh expressions called Acts Network. And in part two, the one you're listening to right now, we're going to get down to the nitty gritty and how he started some of these fresh expressions and how some of these fresh expressions ended. And ultimately, how can you start a fresh expression in your church context? So without any further ado, my name is Sam, that would make you you, and this is the NP2Cast, your roadmap to the Reformation. Let's go! And you actually did have, I wanted, because I remember you told me, we just got done doing Steeple to Street, which is a whole thing we did down here in Louisiana. And, you and Michael have really crushed it. And one of the things you talked about, it must have been the first or third session, if memory serves, was you talked about that very problem or that very challenge of when churches, usually with FXs, is like, I don't see these people. I don't know. How can Mitch have, church in a rugby field or didn't you have one also that was fitness related, if I remember correctly? Yeah. Yep. And, but it was when, of course, that's what happens in fresh expressions, which I was actually talking to somebody yesterday about that. It was like, yes, you listen and you love. And then because of that, relationships form. And out of those relationships, church forms. Yeah. And of course, when I say church, that's everything that church is supposed to mean, right. Which is, discipleship, service, everything that, well, really discipleship, that's what a church is. And it was interesting. I remember this story, and I don't want to take away your thunder, but that was a big moment for the inherited church in your Acts Network church.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Tell us about that.
You're spot on. Well, yeah, because I think up until that point, the idea of fresh expressions was almost more something our inherited church side of us tolerated rather than embraced. Mm-hmm. And the only reason for that, part of it was they didn't fully understand, and part of it was, I think in fairness to them, like, is this really something that's going to lead to discipleship in Jesus Christ? Mm-hmm. Well, we hadn't had a lot to share with them up until that point, and so they were almost taking our word for it that something was happening. But to the individual you're referring to, when they were able to see his baptism, his commitment to Christ, and that it came about through a fresh expression, it was one of those moments where the light bulb went on and they're like, okay, this is not just a fun activity. It's not just a kind of a goofy thing. There's intentionality here to lead people in a way to come to embrace Christ, and recognizing it would not have happened had we only done a Sunday morning only approach. Mm-hmm. And so it just finally then became real to them. And yeah, that was a game-changing moment for us.
And if I remember right, that individual, when it was at Mitch's Acts Network?
Yeah.
Yeah. He came to him and he said, hey, I'm ready to be baptized, but it was his choice to come back to the inherited church.
Yeah, exactly. So in that case, for that gentleman, he had actually been hurt pretty badly as a young child in the church.
Oh, wow.
And so when he said he wanted to be baptized, we were totally prepared to go to this fitness factory, do the baptism there. When we raised that idea with him, though, he said, well, in baptism, if I am going to be born again and new life, it would actually be meaningful to me to come back to a place where I had one time actually been hurt, and now let that go and be received in new life in the inherited church. And so again, I couldn't have planned it better. I didn't force that. We weren't even going to do that. It was at his initiative to say, I think it'd be better, therefore, even though the the first time that he stepped in our facility, like the actual facilities, he came to be baptized. I mean, it wasn't like he even came before that. And so it was just powerful the way that all unfolded.
Whoa. Like, I mean, that is such a, I didn't know that part. That was, that's pretty stout. Wow. Yeah. You just need to tell everybody that. Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Well, I mean, you're what? You're 10 years there. You're 5 years in to your Fresh Expressions journey with Acts Network. Yeah. And you've learned a lot. You've had a lot of fruit, and you're in this. I would say you're in a pretty mature, or at least it sounds like you're in a fairly mature model, blended ecology. But I'm interested in, being 5 years in now, having, all this stuff happening. What are some of the challenges that you see or that you are currently experiencing? And then maybe some of the even unforeseen ones. Well, let's just start with that. What are some of the challenges you see in this, mature blended ecology or maturing blended ecology?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it's kind of odd even to hear you refer to it as mature. It does not, I get why you say that, and it does not feel mature at all to me or to us. I get that we've been on this journey maybe a little bit longer than some others, but I will just say it feels to me very, very much like, okay, maybe we've taken a step off the starting line, but that's about it.
Okay.
I feel like we have so far to go. So in terms of challenges, I mean, there's a lot, there's a bunch. One is, while I think we've gained some clarity in terms of the mixed ecology, we want to continue to figure that out. So where can there be more places of overlap, and how do we celebrate both, and all of those kinds of things? I think it's very, very easy to fall off the side of, well, fresh expressions are better, or the inherited church is better. So even though we try to be very mindful to keep them both there, it's just so easy to default to one or the other.
Yeah.
So that would be one. Always raising up the next generation of leaders for anything, but in this case, the Acts Network, that is prominent on our mind. It's actually been our goal from the beginning, and we haven't gotten to this yet, so I'm kind of confessing that. It's always been our hope that as a fresh expression is launched, when it reaches true maturity, it should then launch another. Yeah. Which then launches another. So instead of like a hub with 12 spokes, what we'd rather see is multiple generations, because it's the multiple generations that actually get to multiplication versus just replication. And so we're not as far along there as I would like us to be. We've had a few things begin to occur, but that is to say, fresh expressions are going to face the same challenge as our inherited church that way. Like, we always want to see multiple generations occur, but it's so easy that once it gets started, that becomes, inward focused somehow. So how do we always keep them outward focused? How do we keep them growing and maturing, that this multiplication will occur? And it's just, I want to be really clear. If you were to talk to any member of, or some members of our church, there's a whole lot that understand some. There's a whole lot still to this day that don't really fully get this. And so it's a constant education process. In fact, what is this, Mark? In fact, in June of, after Easter, I should say, we'll be entering into a sermon series just entitled Follow Me. And part of that for us is going to be unpacking yet again what it means to live into this blended ecology as Christ is leading us. We can't repeat it too much. So the constant education process is another one. And then the last thing I'll just say would be, we want to see just more and more maturing in Christ, whether that's somebody giving their life to Christ, or learning to serve in Christ, or learning to give in Christ. It's not a new problem, but it's not like we've arrived. We're just getting started.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's interesting that you mentioned that multiplication, which is that's one of the last. We're still teaching and getting people to understand the flow of what an FX looks like, and that last one, do it again. Yeah. I think that's always. I wonder if that's actually like an anthropological problem. It's just so hard
Yep.
to get us as a humanity to leave the cave, leave the home where we feel safe and secure and we know everybody there, to then go to a whole new place that we have no idea. And like what I know with doing Fresh Expressions for myself is and being a church planter is, it takes a lot of energy to make all those relationships and to be honest, experience all that hurt, because it happens. One of our planters, he mentioned that he said he really wishes, he always heard that people are going to leave, and he goes, but I really wish they would have took me by my shoulder and said, people are going to leave you, and it is going to hurt. And because that's a real thing with starting churches and starting Fresh Expressions. And so I'm not surprised then that multiplication is the bailiwick. I think it's always going to be our bailiwick.
I think so too. And yes, and I'm also struck by, somehow, the early church, it occurred. And so, or even like it, for me, one of the things I love about the United Methodist Church, if you look in our own history, there was a time when the Methodist movement was the dominant Christian movement of the time, particularly in America, where I think it got to 1 in 4 people
I had no idea that. Wow.
Yeah, and so there was just, it's the whole, with the circuit riders. I love that concept, because basically so much growth and expansion was happening. You get a circuit rider just to make the circuit and do the bare essentials at each place, just as a way of trying to keep up with this explosion. Gosh, what would that look like again? And so you're right. It's always the challenge of the church, but it certainly is a challenge when it comes to Fresh Expressions as well. Yeah.
Now you make me want to do a whole other dissertation on how the early church multiplied like they did. That is really, now you got my brain thinking. So.
Well, fascinating to me in that, so we're working really hard. We've created a discipleship journey and pathway here that I'm very curious to see what will happen with it, because again, I think what we do with our church members is we train them to be members and volunteers. But when I look at the early church, they had a 3-year process just to be catechized, to be baptized, right?
Yeah.
Years. Well, that's not a mistake then in correlation with the growth that then happened. And so what are those elements we need to gather today, again, with intentional formation and depth, that are going to set them up for the flourishing and the multiplication? There's so much to explore there, I think.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's exactly when I was, where did you go to seminary? I'm trying to remember.
I went to Duke.
Oh, okay. I went to Asbury. And one of the things I remember, we had to take, catechesis, historical catechesis. And when I read, some of the intense catechesis, and do you remember the martyrdom of Perpetua and Felicitas?
Briefly,
dude, that was stout. Because it's like here's these two people that are just catechumens. One of them's pregnant, another one's their helper, all this kind of business. And they get in trouble for being Christians, and they're going to be put to death. And literally all they have to do is renounce it. Yeah. That's it. And they're free and clear. Even the father, one of the fathers came and said, all you got to do is just say, bump this. And they're like, nah, we're going to do this. And they both died. And this is before they even were baptized. And I'm like, how do we do that?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. It's amazing. It's truly amazing.
Yeah. Well, it makes me feel like I was like, what? Would I do that? But I don't know. I guess I don't want to.
I know. Yeah.
I don't want to find out. But we're about wrapped up. But I want to ask a couple final questions that I always tend to wrap up with. And the first one is, what do you wish someone would have told you when you first started exploring Fresh Expressions, when you first started hearing about it? What do you wish somebody would have told you that had been like, kind of like what I said about my friend, Fernie? It was like, you hear it, but then it's like, no, listen to this. Like, so what's something that sticks in your mind?
Yeah. I think I would say One, this will take longer than you think. I tend to like things to move quickly, expediently, efficiently. So this will take longer than you think. It will be messier than you think.
Mm.
And it's okay. like like that's okay. So I mentioned to you a little while ago, at the very beginning, I was trying to define so many things before they even occurred. And honestly, I feel like Matt now would need to say to that Matt, like, will you just relax a little? Like, just relax and empower, and like, it's okay. Because it's not, I mean, if something goes off the rails, we'll address it. But that particular issue has been so minimal. It's kind of funny now that we've had other issues, but like, that's just not something we've had a ton that we've had to deal with. And so just looking back at the amount of stress I put on myself and others, that would certainly be unnecessary.
Mm.
I think the other thing I would just say, though, is I thought this at the beginning, but I would say it doubly so now. It's so worth it.
Mm.
Like, it's like I have more hope now than I did at the beginning. Like, I just feel like God is doing a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I love that. I love this too. This is not a program. Like, we're not engaging in this. This is a way of being, and that's incredibly exciting to me. I think that God is raising up this movement at this time, and with holy purpose, and that I see it. I believe ever more in it. So, yeah, the idea that it's just so worth it.
That's good. That's good. And I was thinking about what you said before with the length and the messiness and the just relax kind of thing would be. I tell you, one of my mentors told me this one time when I was. I tend to. For somebody who tries not to be a binary thinker, I tend to be a binary thinker. And so, like, no, man, inherited forms of church, but yeah, FX is better. But, it's one of those times. Yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
But, there's so many problems in the world, and even more problems in the church. And it's so easy to critique things and people. And I remember one of the things he told me was, and we were talking about a very specific thing, but it really applies to so many things, is it's not a problem to be solved, but a tension to be managed. Yeah. And I think that is a lot what I think about with FX, really church in general.
Yeah.
I think we approach a lot of things as problems.
Yeah.
Like here's a good, like one we just had at Steeple to Street, that was it wasn't direct like this, but it was the vein of, how are you going to make sure you're not going to get wonky theology?
Right.
And my first question is, we got plenty of it. Don't worry about it. Right. You don't need to worry about a fresh expression to get wonky theology.
Right.
But that's always, I mean, if you're talking about people growing in their sanctification and understanding who God is and who they are, that's not a problem to solve.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's a tension you got to manage, and it's a never ending thing that hopefully not hopefully, I guess I have to believe this as an elder in the UMC, like there will be glorification after sanctification, but in the meantime, it's just a tension to be managed.
And as you say that, Sam, like just one other thing that I think I would say, like, gosh, I wish I would have either been told this or thought more about it. Going into this, I would have said it this way: the inherited church needs the life and vitality of fresh expressions. Mm-hmm. Still true, but I think what I would say now is that the inherited church needs fresh expressions, but fresh expressions also needs the inherited church. And here's why, to your point about negotiating the tension. Mm-hmm. The inherited church, what I do believe when it's healthy, does do well, is it helps us go deep. But it's not very good at helping us to go out and go wide. I think fresh expressions in general do a really good job of helping us go wide and go out there. But what we started, I wouldn't have guessed this at the beginning, but a significant learning curve for me was we found out, don't forget, the very ones who are really good pioneers going out to start new things, once it's started, what do they want to do? They don't want to sit around and nurture and help you go deep. They want to go do more new.
Mm-hmm.
So, so like, thinking about APEST, like if I'm categorizing super generally here, but if you think of Fresh Expressions as generally wired as apostles and evangelists, and inherited church is generally shepherds and teachers, well, you go start something new, but then you need shepherds and teachers then to come alongside you and help them go deep, so that then those apostles and evangelists can go do more new, because that's what they're wired to do. And so it's both that are needed. And that's been a change for me of like, it's not just the one thing, like both bring gifts that are needed in this flourishing of this movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Alan Hirsch said it best, was really a church isn't a church without all 5 gifts functioning.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's what that's the hardest tension for me to manage, because I mean I'm an 8 by tendency, and so I know I'm a serial entrepreneur and I'm a serial abandoner, because but I gotta like, okay, who are the shepherds and teachers around me, because I know that if this goes well, there's going to need to be somebody here that's actually going to care for and teach the people as they evolve and as they grow in their sanctification. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, one last thing, from your beautiful place up in Williamsport. By the way, how much snow you guys got, or have you finally been finished with that?
Thankfully, literally as of about yesterday, no more.
Nice. Is it done, you think?
It is done.
Nice.
I think at this point, I mean, today we cracked close to 70. We'll still have some nights where it's like freezing, but I think our snow, I really hope it's done.
You really hope it's done.
Well, we all like that first snow that's really pretty and wonderful. Then we're ready to be done. So at this point in the year, bring on the warm weather. Yeah,
I grew up in Ohio. I remember what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely.
After 3 months of Great Depression, you're over it.
You got it. Yes.
Well, speaking of depression, let's give some encouragement. So, if now that you've spent some time with our Louisiana folks and we got to spend time with you, is there any kind of like encouraging word or encouraging word you might want to give us going forward?
I think I would just say, in the most sincere way that I can, thank you. Because there was such a good response with those that we interacted with. It's clear to me that it did not seem like, let me learn another program's content. It really seems to me more like a stirring of the spirit of, okay, what kind of church, God, are you leading us into? And then we're willing to go there. So I just want to say thank you, because I think that was reflected in the level of involvement of how many folks and participants, but then also their level of engagement. Yeah. And so I just want to say to those who are part of that, and to you, a sincere thank you for responding to what God is stirring in your heart, and don't stop. Like, just keep going. And I can't wait to see all that God will be unleashing in this time and through you all. And thank you for that.
Yeah, me too. I tell you what, I'm not a native here, but I've been here for 20 years now, and I'm still not a native, by the way. But I tell you what, that's one thing that so impresses me about people in Louisiana is their level of resilience is ridiculous. I mean, it's when they should stop, they just don't, and it's amazing what they can accomplish in it. But I would say too, I don't think they know how much Holy Spirit they got in them. It's like, I can see so many people. That's what I think I said at Steeple to Street. These people already get it. Yeah. They're just finally getting language and permission. Yep. And I was like, man, I've already talked to, like, your guys' just your 4 sessions with us. Man, I've talked to so many people that I am an outside the box thinker, and I'm just like, you want to do what? Yeah. And I'm like, let's figure it out, So, yeah. But so thank you guys for being vessels and mouthpieces of God, to let us know what how Fresh Expressions has impacted your context in your church, and how I absolutely know it's going to do the same for ours. So, Matt, You rock. I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the past few weeks, and I hope I get to know you some more. I can't say I'm ever going to go to Virginia because I've swore off the North because of cold. But if it happens to be in the 80s and plane flights are cheap, I would welcome an invitation.
Well, maybe we can work it around the Little League World Series.
There we go.
Who doesn't want to come to the Little League World Series at some point, right? Maybe.
That's a good point. I've never actually been.
There you go. You got to do it sometime.
Yeah. Well, so wait a minute. How many of those parents? You know what I'm talking about? Those type of parents.
Yeah.
You see that a lot?
Enough. We'll leave it.
Enough? Ooh,
Enough.
Good. I can bring popcorn then. That's really what I was going to say.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, hey man, I appreciate you. Hope to talk to you soon. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for all that you are doing. There really is. It's exciting, and thank you for what you're doing to make it all happen and bring it about and foster this holy movement. It's awesome.
Thanks. You rock. Woo! Isn't Matt great, y'all? I mean, the guy just exudes humility, and he's a pastor's pastor. Let me tell you, I just feel better talking to him. And it was great to hear about how he and his church rallied around this idea of fresh expressions and reached all kinds of new people in new places that he never even considered would happen, and had all kinds of great kingdom impacts in his church and in his community. And hey, if you're interested in starting a fresh expression in your church or in your community, come to a Vision Day. I'm going to put the link in the description. I want you to come to this free event. We have 1 in May, 3 in June, 2 online, 2 in person, where we get to dig into what a fresh expression is, how we articulate a vision of that for your context, and ultimately practical steps on how to start and release a fresh expression of church in your community, going to new places to reach new people. Do me a favor and like, comment, subscribe, do all the things, whether you watch on YouTube or whether you listen through the podcast. Give our podcast some love, because that's how other people are going to find out about it, and share it with a friend. Maybe there's something interesting that might strike them, that'll strike their fancy, and then maybe they'll start a fresh expression of church, and I'll get to work with them, and it'll be all because of you. It'll be because of you. Don't be selfish. Share it. Well, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it again, so you better get used to it. God loves you. I love you. Now go out and love the world. See ya.